Good evening, everybody, or maybe good morning, depending upon where you are or when you watch this. Welcome to the Bardstream. I am Esper, as always, and I am back on my regular Bardstream schedule this month. First Tuesday, 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Eastern. It's just going to be me this time. So once again, I'll be able to devote my full attention to my own topic of interest, and hopefully I'll be able to do some Q&A as well. I always like taking your questions. What's going on? Real Holtzinator, good to see you as always. I've also got a little bit of a microphone situation going on presently. I've been trying to figure it out for a few days. So I'm actually running off of this um, earbud thing at the moment. So hopefully you can hear me. If anyone wants, please leave a comment and let me know if you're hearing me okay, if my voice is coming through loud and clear. So I'm basically done with my book. Woo! Hooray! There's still some steps to do, mainly like formatting the PDF and getting in touch with the print company and getting it printed and da 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 da. Thanks, Cody. Glad to know that you can hear me fine. So there are still some steps to go to realize the product, but otherwise, for all intents and purposes, the book, the content, the art, the everything, the revising, the endless revision, um, I believe is done. I cross my fingers when I say that. So I've talked about the book a lot lately, so I don't actually want to focus on it this Bardstream, right? I'll talk about it more again sometime soon, but tonight I want to actually talk about house rules. This is a topic that has come up with some of my friends and players in my local group recently. I made a video about my house rules like 3 or 4 years ago, and I went back and looked at it the other day, and I realized that it's actually pretty out of date. So I would like to make a new YouTube video talking about the house rules that I use for 5th edition D&D, and I'll probably do that sometime soon. So this Bardstream will be something of preparation for that, and I'm going to talk about the house rules that I use and why I implement them. And as always, I'll look at your feedback, and this will prime me to be able to make a good quality YouTube video where I go over my personal preferences and why it is that I like them. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and I'll show them to you as I'm going through them. Again, this is for 5e Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, so the first house rule has to do with the generation of ability scores. So most people like to roll. Most people don't like to do the point buy. If a player wants to do point buy for their character, I have no problem with that. It's totally fine. Though that's not very typical. Usually people like rolling. I like rolling. I think that is the classic way to generate your ability scores. But in rolling, you can come up with some very wildly swinging results. Usually it's fine, but frequently enough, you'll get some wacky results. So I have two ways in which I mitigate the problems with that can pop up when you roll ability scores. First is that the minimum of any ability score is 6. And by the way, just to make sure we're all on the same page here, when I'm talking about rolling ability scores, I'm talking about the way that it's been done for a couple of editions now, where you roll 4d6s, drop the lowest one, add the other 3 together. That generates a number, and then you get the 6 numbers, and then you assign them or plug them in wherever you think fits best for your character. Okay, so if you rolled a 5 or a lower on one of those results, it becomes a 6. I do that because these are meant to be heroic characters with the potential to even become legends. And the 5 and below is really pretty bad, quite bad. 6 already is pretty bad, but below that is treading into the territory of um, doesn't doesn't seem to fit a character who is made out to be a hero. And then here's the important one, because it's pretty rare to roll below a 6. This is the real important one. So you generate your 6 scores, and then of course each score has a modifier. 10 is plus 0, 12 is plus 1, 14 is plus 2, 16 is plus 3. Going the other way, 8 is -1, 6 is -2, etc. So total up all 6 ability scores modifiers. And what we're looking for is that total to be between a +3 and a +8. It's range, it's kind of a sweet spot. If your total of all your ability scores is below a 3, adjust your ability scores up until they get to +3. And then if the total is above an 8, you adjust them so that it comes down to a +8. I don't know if you can tell it just by seeing +3 to +8, but that actually allows for a wide, huge range of variation. All that it actually does is it just cuts out the extremely underpowered results and the extremely overpowered results. So from +3 to +8, you can still get everything from a below average array to a typical array to a powerful, well above average array, everything in between. I'm actually going to do a demo here. I got my dice. Let's roll it up just so you guys can see it in action. All right, got a 3, 3, and a 5. So that's an 11 with a plus 0. Okay, then we've got an 11, 0. And we've got an 11. This is bizarre. And we have an 11. Oh my gosh. I've never seen this before. Am I going to roll all 11s? I have never seen this. I've never seen anyone roll all the same number ever. Okay, that's not an 11. That is a 13. So I can already tell just by looking at it, most likely this is going to be the underpowered one. That's going to get a little bump up. That's a 9. Okay, so the total that we get here is +0, right? The total is +0, which is not good. Not good, no. So if you were making the character in one of my campaigns, now what you would do is you would go in here and you'd adjust some things, and you can adjust it essentially however you want. So, but it has to be like the minimum amount of adjustment possible to get you to the +3, right? Bare minimum. So let's say that's pretty terrible. So let's do a 16, right? That'll be nice. That gets us to +2, and then say a 12. There we go. That gets us to +3. All right. So still, that's a little on the lower end of things in terms of ability score arrays, but it's viable. You can work with that. And once you go in and you get your racial ability modifiers on top of this, you'll be good to go. The character will definitely function, and you won't have to be crying for the first couple sessions while you're just waiting on that character to die so you can roll up a new one. So that's a good example of it curbing the so underpowered that it's basically unplayable ability scores. And you can also imagine that or you've probably seen how ridiculously overpowered some people get just through sheer luck. Looks like we got a super chat, so let me check in on that. Victor D20, hey, it's been a minute. Good to see you back, Victor. A mandatory donation of gold to make up for missing the last Bardstream. I also personally built a character around the stats I rolled and the setting. I've done this a couple times, and I've heard about how that used to be more prominent in the old school, the early editions of the game. I've even heard of like the very, very rigid old school way where you just roll 3d6 and add them together, and you just go down the line rolling each ability score as you go. You don't get to plug in the numbers or assign them, but you do that first, and then that is supposed to give you ideas or inspiration as to who this character is that has a low strength and a low intelligence, but a very high wisdom and charisma, and that gives you your idea. So I've done that a couple times. They turned out to be very interesting characters. Unfortunately, I don't usually get to play characters for very long. I'm DMing 99% of the time, but I do like playing characters when I get the opportunity. And yeah, I think building that characters that way it's definitely a story-based focus. It's a story-based focus. It's not a power build focus, right? If you have this build in mind and you're wanting to specifically architect, I don't know if that's a verb, construct like an architect your character to have, I'm going to get this at this level and this at this level. I'm going to bump this score and I need this score to be this. And it's very meticulous and power gamey. It's not, that's not the way. But if you're more of like, I'm going to go at this more flowing with the unexpected twists and turns and improvising, and just let the story side of it or the narrative of it, compel me, it's great for that. Now the character might not be as viable as the power gamer character, right? So that's the trade-off. Okay, well, let's keep going because I do want to get to some questions from you all, and I have a couple house rules. Actually, I should have prefaced this. I'm glad I'm doing this live stream because it's actually helping me organize my thoughts for a video that I just might do. I'll probably do. I have a general philosophy or approach to house rules, and that is to not overdo it on house rules. House rules can be a slippery slope, especially for newer DMs or kind of intermediate DMs. I think especially the intermediate DMs. That's probably the biggest culprit. It's a slippery slope where you start house ruling too much and you start to get this perception that so many things in the game are too powerful and broken, and you start like shutting things down and changing this and changing that, and it becomes too much. So that's one thing that's one like guideline that I go by, is don't overdo it on the house rules. And then the other guideline is only implement a house rule if it enhances the storytelling and enhances the tension of the game. Tension and storytelling are like hand in hand. They go hand in hand. So only do it if only implement a house rule if it makes your storytelling and your tension better, increase to story and tension, or B, makes the game funner, more enjoyable, or more interesting. I've seen house rules that do neither of these things, that they only introduce a drawback or a penalty or a complication, but with no benefit associated with it. An example I can give is somebody contacted me once wanting me to check out their armor system that they had created for 5th edition as their homebrew armor system. They'd redone, all the weapons, the armor table, right? And now there's like individual pieces of armor, helmet, gauntlets, breastplate or cuirass or the torso part, boots or greaves. And, if you wore the heavy helmet, it gave you penalties on vision stuff like perception. And if you wore the heavy gloves or gauntlets, you had penalties on thieves' tools and sleight of hand. And if you had the heavy boots, you had penalties on acrobatics. And there was all these penalties involved because it was more realistic that way. And and I said, I can't endorse this house rule. I wouldn't suggest it, because even though it does add in some realism, all you're doing is introducing drawbacks and an additional layer of complication that the players are going to have to learn and remember on the fly, even like constantly, for no benefit. This does not make the game funner in any way. It doesn't make it more interesting in any way. I think the only person who would like this house rule is someone who is such a history buff, someone who's like really, really into historical things and realism, which are fine things to be into. I'm into those things, but I think there's different solutions, and you'll see one actually on my house rules. So I might slightly contradict myself when I come up to this house rule. However, the way that I'm implementing it is to a much more limited scope and much simpler scope, but it is for the purpose of realism. I think the good thing about realism, or like the grittiness, is that it can play into that first point that I made, where it can enhance tension and challenge, which in turn enhances the storytelling. It enhances the player's sense of having overcome or achieved when they do make it through those challenges. So it's a good feeling of reward, of success, of victory. Okay, the next house rule is, I use this milestone system. I've been using it for a while. So when I first started running 5th edition for the first few years, I was just using XP as normal out of the book, and it works pretty well. It's pretty complex though. There's a lot to track, super nitty gritty, and there are some parts of the 5th edition XP system that are not quite my cup of tea, particularly how you level up faster and slower at different levels, and the way that they recommend distributing experience points for fighting groups of monsters, and you've got like the adjusted XP, and then you've got the actual XP that you give out to the players. It's to me, it was too complicated. It's too much for a pretty simple concept of you face challenges or you face significant personal transformations, and they always have some kind of obstacle or something on the line. Something's at risk. So let's just call that in general challenge, right? And if you overcome the challenge through wit or skills or combat or whatever it is, or if you like endure, you are subjected to the challenge and you survive it and you get through it that way through sheer survival, you have made progress towards advancement, towards your next level. Simple concept. Challenge equals experience reward. Challenge gets you close to victory, or succeeding in challenge gets you closer to the next level. So I thought, let's make a simpler system. So an easy challenge is half a milestone. A moderate challenge is 1 milestone. A hard is 2. A deadly is 3, or maybe even more. I've definitely done some encounters that were more than 3 milestones worth. And I'll even use the 5th edition guidelines to determine if something is easy, moderate, hard, or deadly. The D&D Beyond Encounter Builder is just fine. There's some other independent websites that do it, and they're just fine. It's fast and efficient, and it's real easy to give out the milestones, which are essentially experience points. That way, it's so much simpler, and it's also easier to do it on the fly. It's also much easier to give out milestones for non-combat challenges, skill encounters, traps and hazards, story-based challenges, all those things that they don't really have any XP numbers for them in the official books. And you were like, oh, what experience points should I give? I don't know. It gets murky and complicated. This solves it completely, and it's easy for the DM to just make a quick judgment call on how important or impactful or dangerous something was, and go by these guidelines. Once a character achieves 10 milestones, After you complete a long rest and reflect upon all that you have learned, you gain a level. And it's been working great, and I love it. My players continue to love it. So for the time being, I'm going to keep rolling with that. Last house rule for this section about kind of character advancement stuff. When you gain a level and you roll your class's hit die to increase your maximum hit point, I give a minimum of half on the die, and technically it's half rounded down. So 3 for D6, 4 for D8, etc., plus the Constitution modifier. So really, all that this is doing is it's the normal rule. You gain a level, you pick your class that you're gaining a level in. Let's say you were doing Barbarian because he's got the nice big D12, and you roll it, add your con modifier, and that increases your maximum hit points. So it's that. All that I've done is just cut out the lower half of it. So why do I do this? For two reasons. One is that it's the rolling really low, particularly like rolling a 1 on a D12 or a D10 is so unfun that I got revolted by it from a barbarian character of mine in 3rd edition. I don't know, it just got under my skin that bad that I've been doing it this way ever since. And then the other reason is that my campaigns tend to be pretty challenging. Even though I am a DM that's of the mindset that is it's not very railroad, or to put it in a different way, I give quite a bit of freedom to the players and the characters. I like that. And so they have more agency in terms of getting themselves into the danger. But in the end, it doesn't really matter. I'm the DM, they're the players. I'm the one who says what monsters there are. So I know that my campaigns tend to be pretty challenging, pretty difficult. And I do have these other rules in here that makes things a bit grittier. So I think that the characters need it. They need to feel a little heroic. And it doesn't actually make them more powerful. It's, the same rolls that you could get anyways. It just cuts out the bad, the worst of the hit die rolls. Anyhow, next has to do with some classes. I always thought it was a little bit weird that only rogues and bards got expertise. I understand why rogues and bards get it. I think it's great the way that they get it, and it totally fits those classes. I just think it's weird that no other classes get expertise at all. When, the rogue can have expertise and be an expert in and better in arcana than a wizard who's probably been studying arcana in a formal way, probably for years, for dedicating a lifetime to it. And then here's the thief scoundrel guy, and he's like, yeah, arcane, of course, I'm better than you at that. It's weird. It doesn't make sense. So I've just picked out certain classes that I think are the icons of certain skills. This is not supposed to be like okay, everybody gets an equal share. I'm not really into that. I like to do things that make sense for story and world building. So sorry, fighter, you don't just automatically get it in. I don't know, what should the fighter get? Athletics? I don't know. Okay, so the bard, if you're proficient in performance, you have expertise in it. The cleric, if you're proficient in religion, you have expertise in it. The druid, if you're proficient in nature, you have expertise in it. Also, this bit here, the player's handbook is kind of unclear. It doesn't really say while you're wild shaped if you can spin the beast's hit dice. Like, let's say you're in a beast form and you're wounded and you take a short rest. Are you spinning the beast's hit dice to replenish your hit points, or are you using your own? So I've just clarified that no, you don't get access to these multiple free pools of hit points every day. Ranger, if you're proficient in survival, you have expertise with it. And wizard, if you're proficient in arcana, you have expertise in it. I couldn't think of any other class that was just truly iconic for some skill. I try to pick ones that to me are very, very obvious and cut and dry. Wizards are masters of arcane knowledge and studying magic lore. Bards are the performers. Clerics are the religious, priestly types. Druids are essentially nature priests and nature mages, and rangers are expert survivalists, trackers, and scouts. I couldn't think, like the fighter, for example. I can't say that, like, oh, the fighter iconically is the expert of athletics. That doesn't make any sense, because that could just as easily be a barbarian, a ranger, a monk. So I really just stuck with the ones that I thought were just very, very iconic and clear. This warlock thing here. So here's my warlock house rules. The first one is that you know your patron's spells as you gain the different levels, instead of merely adding them to like the class spell list of spells that you could choose amongst them all. This is something that a lot of people actually don't do by the rules as written, but I don't think they notice, because you're going through the player's handbook classes, and you go through the cleric, and the cleric gets these domain spells, and you just always have your domain spells prepared. Then the druid, the circle of the land, you have the land spells, and they're just always prepared. And then there's the paladin, and there's the oath spells that are always prepared. And so by the time you get to warlock at the end, it's like you're in this rhythm, and it just makes sense. This is your patron, so these spells are always available to you per the style of the patron. Aha! No, you've actually read it incorrectly. Squint and look very closely at the writing. It actually says you merely have those spells on your class spell list, meaning when you gain a level and you learn probably like one more spell as a warlock, they don't get a lot, you're choosing between the standard general warlock spells and your patron spells. So they're like competing against each other, which is counterintuitive and not so enjoyable. So I just give warlocks what most people always thought it was, was all along. Also, there are some invocations in the player's handbook that say you get access to such and such spell. You can cast it once per day using a warlock spell slot. And then in the Xanathar's guide, and I believe in Tasha's as well, they took a new approach where you don't burn one of your very, very few spell slots. So I've just brought the player's handbook invocation spells in line with that. On those once per day spells, they don't burn a spell slot when you use them. Yeah. Okay. Moving on to combat house rules. This opportunity attacks one, basically all it is doing is expanding when an opportunity attack can occur. So it's no longer only when an enemy is moving out of your threatened reach. It's also whenever there's a situation where someone's focus is significantly distracted or let down. Examples I've included are drinking a potion. I think that's the best example, is drinking a potion. I've also put loading a crossbow, though the crossbow expert feat avoids this, or interacting with a complex object, such as working on a mechanism or a trap or a lock. Again, this is I don't know, just a personal peeve of mine. It's realism, but it's such an obvious realism. So the potion example is the one that I always go to. Imagine that you are locked in combat with your opponent, probably fighting for your life, or at least fighting for something very important at stake. And then they pull out this bottle, uncork it, and start chugging a potion. Would you just stand there while they're doing that? Excuse me, good orc. Yes, I know that you want to decapitate me, devour my flesh, and impale my skull upon a spike to serve the mighty will of Grumpsh. But as you see, I'm getting a bit sweaty here, a bit scuffed. You've even drawn a bit of blood. If you don't mind, I'm going to refresh myself for just a moment. Thank you, good orc. Ah, I feel so much better now. Thank you for being a good sport. Now, how about you? Now I'm going to kill you. So it just annoys me so much. I think it's a stupid thing that I want to get rid of. Let's go move along to the next. Flanking. Flanking. So I'm actually using the flanking rule from 4th edition and 3rd edition. The Dungeon Master's Guide, 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide, presents an optional rule where if you're flanking, where the two allies are pincer attacking, one from the front, one from the back, an enemy, you gain advantage. I did that for a while, and really it's too much. It's too much. It's too strong. It's advantage is quite a strong thing, and to introduce that merely for flanking, which is generally fairly easy to get into a flank. I wouldn't say it's super easy, and a lot depends upon what enemies you're fighting and what the terrain is. But in general, setting up a flank is not that difficult. So it's the reward is too high for the low risk on behalf of the flankers. Also, another problem that it creates, which I think this is actually even a bigger problem, maybe just as bad. There are lots of different features, like class features and feats and like monster traits and spells, that you use this feature or spell or magic item or whatever it is so that you can get advantage. And if that's no better than just flanking, then it kind of like takes the power away from those features, spells, traits, magic items, etc. So it kind of flies in the face of the game itself. Let me try to give an example here. Like, oh gosh, what's a spell that gives you advantage? Like Foresight. It's a 9th level spell. It's an amazing spell. Foresight, I have advantage on all my attacks. Oh yeah, cool. Like just the same as flanking that I did against wolves at level 1. So, +2 is great. It's a nice little bonus. It's not too much. It's kind of like half of what advantage gives you, or maybe slightly less than half. I think we can think of advantages like +5. But it's enough to where it helps. How often do you miss by just 1 or 2? And it doesn't take the wind out of the sails of the different features and stuff. And you can even put them together. Let's say you have something that gives you advantage and you're flanking. Well, now you have advantage and +2. I mean, if you're knocked on the ground prone while 2 enemies, one to your back and one to your front, are bearing down upon you with their weapons, yeah, that's a pretty bad situation to be in. Okay, let's move along. Feats. I just have these 2 feats on here: Great Weapon Fighter and Sharpshooter. So with these feats, which are amazing feats, very powerful feats, they have this bullet point that says when you make an attack, you can declare a -5 penalty to your own attack. But if you hit, you get +10 to the damage. So steep penalty for a lot of damage boost. I just found that is too much, especially at the low levels of play. +10, especially in the low levels, is an obscene increase to damage, just obscene. So I've altered it to the penalty is equal to your proficiency bonus, and the additional damage is double the proficiency bonus. So the feat scales with you as you go. A simpler way to think of it is just you don't add your proficiency bonus, and then you get double the proficiency bonus on the damage. So it's worked out fine. We've been running that for a couple of years now, and it works out really just fine. And even once you get to the last tier of play, level 17 and beyond, your proficiency bonus is 6. So it even goes up a little higher than the standard feat. So just like it better that way. General things, aiding or helping. I'm not a big fan of how helping someone is just spin an action and you can help anyone do anything. Now I know that probably a lot of DMs out there do use some judgment calls and say, it's not your character. No, Grug knows nothing about ancient mystical lore, so I don't think he should be helping the wizard's arcana check. It just doesn't make any sense. So I take it a step further, and if you wish to aid the ally, you yourself, the person who is aiding, has to roll against a low DC, and if you succeed, then the ally gains advantage. If you fail, you've actually mucked them up. You've like distracted them or gotten in their way or complicated them, or you've done something to their detriment, and they suffer a disadvantage. So it's actually a risk. And that plays back into that original point I made of house rules increasing tension. I do that a lot in my campaigns. I'm not really into saying no to the players. And now sometimes I do, and sometimes a DM has to say no, or I'm going to pass on that idea. But I try my best to say no as little as possible. Now, sometimes a player has this idea that's too powerful, it's too strong, or like what they're thinking of is like way too much reward for not enough risk. So instead of just saying no, usually what I do is say, okay, well, you can try that, but here's the stakes. You're going to have to make, it's usually like a skill check. And if you succeed, you will, somersault past the horrible monstrosity without provoking any opportunity attacks, landing in the safe square that you wanted, where not only are you flanking, but you're like closer to this other zone that you want to get to. So that's a pretty nice benefit there. But if you fail the acrobatics check, you will, and then there's some kind of drawback. So maybe with this like somersaulting over the monster case, you muck it up and you slam into the monster, and it makes an opportunity attack against you. Or you just trip and you fall prone, and we'll say your speed for this turn is spent. So that's a kind of a general approach that I like to use. You'll see that come up in another house rule here soon. I use variant encumbrance, so that's not actually my own house rule, it's just here to specify that I do use it, again, for the sake of realism. Okay, so this is that point where I said I do actually have an armor thing that's a little more realistic and does introduce a drawback. But hopefully it's much simpler. It's just if you're in armor, that imposes disadvantage on stealth checks. It also imposes disadvantage on ability checks made to swim. It's a realism thing. Some things are just so unrealistic that I can't deal with it as a DM. I guess I'm picky or selective, or kind of a traditional purist type DM. But certain things are just so unrealistic that even in a fantasy world, they just don't make sense to me so much that I introduce a house rule. So I try to be real simple with this one, but I know that if you have a lot of weight, especially like metal armor weighing you down, it is extremely difficult to swim. I don't want to belabor that point. Vulnerability. So normally vulnerability, the creature is vulnerable to some damage type. When it takes damage of that type, it takes double damage. I found that is too extreme often cases, both when the monster has vulnerability and when players get afflicted with vulnerability. So I've taken it back to, this is how it was in 4th edition, and I believe in 3rd edition, if I'm remembering it correctly. So I don't remember if there was vulnerability in 3rd edition. Anyhow, so vulnerability causes an increase of 50% more damage, not an increase of 100% more damage. I get that they were trying to make the math simple, but I mean, adding half as much in is not that difficult of math. Okay, here we go with more of the increasing the tension and danger for the purpose of the improving the storytelling. So if you get knocked unconscious, so you're reduced to 0 hit points, and you get into the dying state, but you don't die, you get stabilized or you get healed, you suffer a wound. Now this is just a generalized wound, so we just give a level of exhaustion. There are some cases, and that's what this next point is talking about, where I will actually give a specific injury instead of a level of exhaustion. Those are a little bit more rare. they're usually in a narrative situation where it's not just combat. It's not just a typical combat where, the orc wants to cut your sword arm off and he hacks your arm off. It's not that. It would be much more specific. Like, you've been captured and the orcs have strapped you down to an altar, and then they go to cut off your hand. And then you'd have like a handless injury, and you'd be a handless character with some drawback that's specific to not having your sword arm or your sword hand. And maybe one day maybe you can survive that situation and break out, and you could find someone to cast regenerate and you can grow your hand back. Or some necromancer affixes some ghoul hand onto you, and that has some pros and some cons. So it increases the tension. I don't really like the whack-a-mole D&D where the character gets knocked out and healing word, he's back up, knocked out, healing word, he's back up, and it's just up and down and up and down forever. Most monsters just die when they are reduced to 0. So it's gritty. It's a little more rough and rugged, and I like it. It even can add to storytelling. I've had many instances where the player, much to their credit, they are role-playing their character as they are wounded. Like, you got smashed in your face with an ogre's great club. You're not doing well. You're seeing stars, and like you've got a pounding headache, and maybe you've got a mild concussion or some kind of acute trauma, and you're not just in tip-top shape. It's like, oh, you got me a 1 hit point back. I'm just as fine as someone who's at full hit points. So these realism things have to do with the storytelling and the immersion, and to reduce goofiness. I know a lot of people like goofy D&D, and that's fine. If you like to play in a goofy style, have fun with it. But not my game. That's not my style. All right. Diseases and curses. So there are these 2 spells in the game. Remove curse, and I guess it's not called cure disease anymore. It's called, or remove disease anymore. It's called, I think it's just lumped in with lesser restoration, actually. Let me just double check. I think it's lesser restoration. One sec. There it goes. Restoration. What am I doing wrong? Oh, I'm just looking at wizard spells. That's what I'm doing wrong. All right. Greater restoration and lesser restoration. There it is. Lesser restoration, 2nd level abjuration. You can end 1 disease or blinded, deaf, and paralyzed poison. Okay, so lesser restoration is 2nd level, and remove curse is 3rd level. So there, imagine that there's a lot of storytelling and tension and myth or lore built into this monster or this ancient curse or this cursed item, and it afflicts the character, and they've got a certain amount of time, this track of maybe days, where they need to find some remedy to it, and there's this lurking threat of them being maligned by whatever it is. Anything from like this, filth fever to lycanthropy to some hag's curse, or maybe a devil's curse, or a vampire or a lich cursed you. And by merely casting the spell, you've just completely thrown all that storytelling out the window. Like it's just done. Just one action. There you go. You're better. Fine. It's like it never even happened at all. And that it's just so bad for storytelling. I'm actually a little surprised that Wizards of the Coast did it this way, because in 4th edition it was not this way. They were rituals that you had to perform. They were long rituals. They took costly components, and you had to roll a skill check. And if you didn't roll high enough, you did not succeed. And that was great. It's like you have a little um, role-playing scene, and you're getting to use your skills, and you're interacting with it, and there's this risk of failure. That's playing a game. That's what a game is. Just saying, I cast remove curse. The centuries old curse, the centuries old lich's curse. It's just got one action. So, not a big fan of that. What I do is that there's going to be a DC associated with a disease or a curse. Just just following the standard DC math that we're familiar with from 5th edition. Usually, it's associated with the monster's challenge rating or the rarity of a cursed item or like the level of spell that cursed you, stuff like that. And when the character uses lesser restoration or greater restoration or remove curse, or the paladins lay on hands, and there's some other things in the game that can do it, you're going to have to make a spell casting ability check. And if you fail, you cannot try again until you've gained a level or until some substantial increase to your curative capabilities occur by the DM's judgment. So let me give an example. You get bitten by a werewolf. Maybe we could even say maybe this like alpha werewolf, and you get this serious lycanthropy affliction. And then the paladin says, "No worry, I burned 5 of my hit points, and you're cured." No, dear paladin, make a charisma check. And I know, all right, this is the alpha werewolf. He's CR 7, so this is like it's probably a DC. What would that be? Maybe like a DC 15, maybe a DC 17, something like that. And the paladin rolls, and he does not achieve the DC. And well, I'll just try it again. No. But here we go. Let's play the game. Let's play the adventure fantasy role-playing game. Like, let's start thinking here. Who do we know that could help us? We don't know anybody? Okay, well, what's close by? Is there maybe a town? Is there maybe a wizard's tower? Is there like a woods witch and her cottage, or like her coven's grove? And you go and you like interact, and you're searching for this person, or maybe this specific rare item, or this wondrous location that you need to travel to, and you find this person, and they give you the whatever you need, the information, or an ancient word that counteracts part of the curse. There's some benefit that was previously unknown to you, or just outside your current abilities. And so that's adventure. That is storytelling. That's great. That's the stuff that brings us to the table, that we love and that we remember. Just like, oh yeah, just take this one little shot of magic. All right, it's all fine. The ancient Dracolich's curse that no one's been able to figure out for millennium. Whatever, 3rd level spell. Get out of here. Stabilizing a creature. Stabilizing a dying creature requires a usage from a healer's kit and a successful DC 10 medicine check. Again, this relates back to my personal pet peeve of things that are just so nonsensical that I just can't stand them to be in my game. So your dear ally Brunor is lying on the ground with a drow crossbow bolt in his ribs, blood trickling out. He is just a few heartbeats away from dying, and you put your hands on him and come on, buddy, make it through this. What are you doing without a healer's kit? If you don't have maybe a bandage to staunch the bleeding, or maybe a poultice with some curative herbs infused into it, or some kind of like tincture that you glaze over the wounds or the burns or whatever. There's all the different like medical, fantasy, medical, medieval implements inside the healer's kit. If you don't have that, what are you doing actually to stabilize them? When your friend gets hit by an acid arrow, is on the ground, and his face is about to melt off when he fails his next death save, and you just go and make your medicine check without any medical supplies. Are you just like spitting on him and rubbing dirt on it? Like, all right, there you go. Walk it off. I don't. Nah. All right, I'm gonna move along. We're almost to the end of this, actually. Items, bag of holding. Creatures cannot enter bag of holdings. This happened because during my epic 5th edition campaign, this got abused, and we discovered that it could be quite abused. The monk, who was extremely mobile, a shadow monk, no less, whenever the party came to any terrain obstacles or magical hazards and traps and other such environmental threats, the whole party would just go into his bag of holding, and he would just spider monkey leap, jump, climb, swing, slow fall, shadow teleport, and just get the whole party across it. All right, everyone, back out of the bag. So that was again, it just hurts the adventure. It hurts the storytelling. It hurts the tension. It hurts the challenge of the game. It makes things seem more like, hey, let's find a way to exploit mechanics of the game so that we can hack it. So, yeah, I guess that's kind of a minor point. Anyhow, magical thrown weapons. If you have a weapon with the thrown property, and it is a magical weapon, after you make your attack, it immediately returns back to you. That's how it was in 4th edition. And for some reason, they took that away in 5th edition. So it was like a step forward in one area from the prior edition, and then they took a step back with 5th edition. So I don't know why they did that. No other type of weapon suffers this kind of drawback. If you get a magic sword, you can keep attacking with your magic sword. It's in your hand, no problem. If you have a magic bow, you shoot all the arrows you want, but it's your bow giving you magic on your attacks. If you're like a javelin character or some kind of like dwarven axe thrower or dwarven hammer thrower, yeah, there's got to be all kinds of things that could be cool. Could be, but we hardly ever see it because this isn't in it. It's so dumb that you've just invested all your money in your magical thrown javelin, and you throw it, and then that's it. It's like, all right, well, I got to go across the whole dungeon room or across the battlefield and get my javelin. And hopefully no monster picked that up, and hopefully it didn't go into an acid pit or some lava. It's this. I've never heard a single player complain about this. Resting. This might be, well, I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's in like my top 3 of my favorite house rules. When you take a long rest, you do not get that refill of all your hit points. Some YouTube channel made a video, a comedy video featuring this point, kind of making fun of how you can be bleeding in agony, dying nearly, and just take a long rest and whoop, we're all better again, no problem. It's, again, I hate to harp on this point and sound like a broken record, but it's one of those things that is just so nonsense. It's so video gamey. It feels like a video game thing, which if I wanted to play a video game, I would just go play a video game. I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons. I'm playing a tabletop role-playing game because I want this feeling of believability and verisimilitude, and for there to be these like gritty challenges that I can fail, that there's no like save point or quick save, and you don't just reload, and like things are really at stake. Things really matter. It gives everything so much like weight and meaning, significance. So this also helps with random encounters during travels. It makes them so much more significant because now when you come across a random encounter, you need to really think: do we want to fight these monsters? Is there a creative solution to get around them? Because it's not just, oh, well, this is our one random encounter for the day, so it doesn't matter. Just go all out, guys, because we're just going to take our long rest now and replenish back to full. It increases the tension. Tension increases storytelling. The last points are about resurrection, specifically resurrection and raise dead and I think true resurrection. No, raise dead and resurrection and true resurrection. Okay, so at the moment I have these two different settings. I have Ikoria and I have Mirrormorn, two D&D worlds of mine. I handle it a little bit differently in both of them. With Ikoria, bringing someone back to life is not as simple as you just cast the spell and spin the diamonds. This is a much more meaningful and significant moment. Coming back from the dead is not trivial. Not only do you need to cast the spell and supply the expensive components, but you will have to interact and do like a skill encounter with probably a god. That's the most likely entity. It could potentially be another being of power that's not specifically a god, but is still like maybe the patron of a warlock, someone that has like a claim, maybe like an archdevil, and the character has entered into a soul contract with the archdevil. So there are, I think, some cases where an entity of power that's not a god will have the final say in someone's soul. But it's a role-playing scene. It's basically what I'm trying to say. It needs to be a role-playing scene where you interact with the divine forces of the cosmos in order to bring someone back to life. And you can only come back to life once. That makes dying and resurrection much more meaningful and impactful. It also reduces, again, the nonsensical quality of this world where anyone, both player characters and the villains, can just keep coming back and coming back and coming back and coming back, and it just doesn't matter. It works so against storytelling and world building. It hurts the world building so bad. So I think that's the end. Oh, Mirrormorn. Mirrormorn does things differently. Mirrormorn has kind of a different god system. The gods of Mirrormorn are not quite the same as in like standard D&D, where there's like this pantheon of worldwide gods that are all these like lofty people, humanoid-looking people. The gods are actually local gods. They're like regional, often creatures, beings of power, like the great giant eel that's in the watery pit of the goblin shrine, and the living storm that's like this giant flying jellyfish that constantly has a cloud of mist and lightning hovering about him, and the white raven. There are these like specific smaller scale local regional gods that are often creatures, and they have ranks, just like how player characters have levels. They have these divine ranks. So when you use Raise Dead, Resurrection, or True Resurrection in Mirrormorn, again, not only do you have to cast the spell and pay for the expensive material components, but the god either most closely aligned, it's the god most closely aligned with the character, because that's the one who has like authority over the soul, right? The final say. That god, in order to bring someone back to life, a mortal who to escape the bonds of death, this universal force or law, the god must actually give up and give to the mortal a piece of their own divine essence, and in doing so, they lose a divine rank. So it's a very it's a lot. It's a high cost for a god to pay. So essentially, coming back to life is not going to be really possible unless you can convince that god, unless you are like championing the god's cause, and the god needs that person to be alive. So there's not much resurrection happening in Mirrormorn, and I honestly, I like that. I like worlds where people can't just come back and forth, life and dead, life and dead, life and death. It it disrespects something that is essentially giving the ultimate power that underlies everything in the game. You know, if you reduce every single challenge in the game down to its most fundamental component, it's life and death. It's what it all boils down to in the end, life and death. And to treat that in a like this casual casual is the first word that comes to my mind. To treat it in a way that is hand waving away the most profound aspects of it, that just doesn't fit with my style, and I think it hurts my settings. So that's what we've got. We've got a mixture of house rules. I've got I think that's 3 pages, 2.5. Okay, it's 2.5 pages. So a good amount of them. Maybe I should cut it down a little bit. I don't know. A lot of them have to do with making a gritty setting that the realism is a little bit higher, and like the tension and role playing gets emphasized, and the world building gets emphasized. And then the other ones are like enhancing things that are just fun and cool and decent and make sense for player characters, like the wizards having expertise with arcana and magic thrown weapons come back to you and whatnot. So, that took a little bit longer than I thought it would. We've got a lot of comments. I hope you guys got something out of those house rules. Maybe you could use 1 or 2 of them on your own for your own games, and I hope that they help your games. And I do plan on doing an actual YouTube video sometime soon where I will talk about those house rules in more concise terms. But this was really good to be able to sound this out. I'm going to go through some comments here. Let's see. Cody Lang or Lange? Cody Lang. Nice, man. Glad the revision part is over for you. Totally needed, but gets old, lol. Yeah, man. I have never worked so much on one single, RPG thing ever. And I've run a lot of campaigns and even built my own RPG systems before. It was tremendous, but I'm so glad I did it, because it has a high level of development and polish, and I'm proud of that, and I think it makes it a great book, a great product, and I want people that buy it to trust that they have purchased a great book, a good product, and something that will serve them. And I want me and everyone who was involved, or the artist, to have a sense of pride. We're not going to look back on this book and cringe and oh god, that needed 6 more months in the oven. Strat Player 05, man, who does this guy think he is? Someone who wrote a book? Oh, a tome, even a tome. Real Holtzinator, my math teacher once had a student roll a die 60 times to demonstrate how probability is not necessarily the outcome. The student rolled 10 ones, 10 twos, 9 threes, 10 fours, 11 fives, and 10 sixes. Yeah. That's randomness for you. So randomness includes all possibilities. It is possible that I could roll, let's say, a 3 10 times in a row on a D6. It's possible. If everybody who plays D&D dedicated their time to just rolling d6s and doing like these bouts, sets of 10s, eventually, sooner or later, someone is going to roll 10 times in a row. It's bound to happen, even though it's like 3, 3, 3. That's not random. That's like this repeating steady thing. Well, random can be that. If it's all possibilities of all the potential iterations of all outcomes, some of those outcomes are going to be very orderly. It's a curious thing. Victor D20. I started a new campaign recently where the party are a party of a mercenary company. Very nitty, very gritty, but not historically brutal. But they're also not superheroes in a company of mooks. Everyone is competent in the company, from officers to the average soldier. Cool. Well, I hope your campaign's going well, Victor. The historical part, like everything, is a double-edged sword. I love history. I get a lot of inspiration from history, and history informs a lot of my my RPG content and my writing. But history is very complicated. Very, very, very complicated. Human beings are very complicated. Technology is very complicated. Society is very complicated. And all those things are always changing all the time. And, you know, once you start going back just a short ways, we don't really have great records of a lot of things. I mean, we've only had reliable video footage for a number of decades now. The past, the farther back you go, it just becomes this like misty place where we think we know things and we have evidence that lends credence to what we know, but we don't really know for sure about a lot of things. And you can get into arguments that bog down and get you into the muck and the weeds very quickly when it comes to history, especially once you start talking about weapons and armor. So everything in balance, everything in good measure. I like, like a good dose of history and like getting informed and inspired by history and real world. And then like a good dose of fantasy, stuff that is from the imagination, from dreams, stuff that is just cool, like I think it's fine to have a world where spears and swords and bows and arrows and shields, like those are the most common weapons of battle, and knives and clubs and axes and stuff like that, right? Those are the most common weapons of battle. But like there's a thorn whip that was made by the Prince of the Red Caps, and it's this like 8-foot long lash of some rare thorny plant vine from the Feywild, and just by holding it, you have to take some damage as it pierces into your skin, but you can lash people with these powerful thorns from as a reach weapon. That's just cool. It's evocative. So they balance each other out, right? I don't like it to go extreme one way or the other. I think if you go too extreme into like realism and history, you're gonna get into arguments, you're gonna bog down into the weeds, and you're gonna actually come into things that are not fun. I think there's like this drop-off point where if it gets too realistic, it's not a fun game anymore. You're just simulating reality, and reality has some very unpleasant harshness and limitations and such. Okay. But then if you go too far in the other way into like the fantasy and the imagination, like nothing matters and like nothing means anything. And it's just this goofy, nonsensical garble. All right, let's keep going. Robo Monkey. I adopted your milestone system when I saw it in the Dreams and Nightmares campaign. It's dope. Thanks, Robo Monkey. I and my players have enjoyed it quite a bit. It still captures what's great about the experience point system. It's great to overcome monster or a trap or some kind of challenge and get the experience points. That is so cool. I love that. I love a character being able to decide to take on some challenge and get this experiential reward. Maybe the rest of the party doesn't even want to do it. They say, we've completed all of the we've done what we came here to do, right? The main objective is finished at this dungeon. We're tired, we're hurt, we're low on resources, we're low on spell slots. Let's go. And the rogue says, well, speak for yourself. I'm feeling fine. I'm going to go take a look and see what's behind this secret door that I just found. Oh, a dark corridor. I'm going to go scout it out. I'm going to explore it. There might be buried treasure in there. There might be something worth pilfering. There might be it could be anything, right? It's like the Wheel of Fortune. And he goes. And halfway down the dark corridor, a gout of flame from a fire trap, and he evades it through skill and luck, and he gets to the end, and there's this lower din, and he creeps down there, and there is a the party defeated a dragon earlier in the dungeon. This is the dragon's child, not a great adult dragon, a younger one, but still a dragon, and there it is. Is it sleeping? Is it looking at something? Captivated by something that is staring into a magic crystal ball, or reading a book? Does the rogue want to fight this dragon? Does it try to quietly sneak past? There's some treasure over there. Can he steal it? Oh, the dragon is asleep and it's clutching the crystal ball. Can he sleight of hand and get it out of its grips without waking up the dragon? Could the rogue face this dragon by himself? Well, he's quite evasive and dexterous, but it's a green dragon. It doesn't breathe flames that he can the dexterity save avoid. It breathes, clouds of poisonous gas that will envelop him. And he only has a con of 12 and no proficiency in the con saving throw. That's so cool. It's dangerous as hell. You got to be kind of a madman to do it, but it's like, that's interesting. Like, I want to know what happens there. I want that possibility to be there. If that possibility isn't there, if the DM says, no, we can't do that kind of thing, you all have to always stay together, and you're always just going to get this regimented, I tell you when you level up and everyone's on the same track. It's so bland. It's so robotic. It's mechanical. It's like, well, I mean, if that was a book, that would be a boring book. I don't want to read a boring book or watch a boring movie, No, Bilbo, don't go in there and, scout out the treasure hoard with Smog. And no, don't try to steal a piece of treasure from Smog's hoard. We have to always all stay together all the time and be exactly equal and the same, like freaking cookie cutters in some beige colored dough. So glad you like my milestone system, which I call it milestone, but is sort of an experience point system. Victor D20, I allow players to re-roll ones when rolling for hit points, but they will need to keep what they re-rolled. Okay, cool. So you've got a similar mindset to mine. And I assume you're talking about like the hit die you roll when you gain a level to increase your maximum hit points. Yeah. Particularly sucks for like barbarians and fighters, It's not so bad if you only got a D6, so it's like 1 on a D6. That sucks, bummer. But you can only get up to a 6 anyhow, so it's not so far off. But like from a 12 to a 1, that is what instigated that house rule. I had a barbarian character in 3rd edition, and I gained the level, and it was a brutally difficult campaign. I don't know what that DM's deal was. It was crazy. And I rolled my D12 and do 1. Ugh. All right, there you go. You're leaning. grain of sand to your hit point pool. Bah. The real Holtzender. So if the druid is the king of nature, what is the ranger? The ranger is a scout, hunter, survivalist, tracker, warrior of the wilds. So the druid is like the cleric, right? The druid and the cleric are of the same cloth, we could say. We could also put the wizard in there as well, right? Like the wizard is the archetypal utmost mage of arcane magic. The cleric is the archetypal utmost spellcaster of godly magic, as in like the pantheon gods. And the druid is the supreme archetypal spellcaster of nature magic, or even like ancient nature gods or nature spirits or primal spirits. You can flavor that a couple different ways. The ranger would be more in the same camp as like fighter, barbarian, and rogue. Maybe we could say rangers like got 1 foot in fighter, rogue, barbarian, and then 1 foot in druid. But he's definitely not the master like the druid is. The ranger is masterful in his own way. Let's see. Actually, I'm about out of time here. I'm going to try to just pick out 1 or 2 comments here. But Esper, steel floats. Depends. A suit of chainmail does not float. A sword does not float, and a steel ingot does not float. Now, a water vessel that its hull is made of steel, and it is engineered to displace water, will float until you compromise that hull. Yeah, and once that hull fractures, the water displacement is gone and the steel sinks like steel. All right, so here is a dissenting comment. I'm going to read this. Randy and Ed. Fuck the realism argument. It just takes out the survival mechanic of inventory management. A better way of having inventory management is making it like Minecraft, where you place items into slots. Well, I'm not sure how to answer that. Spoken very authoritatively, though it's a little unclear. It just takes the survival mechanic. It just takes out the survival mechanic of the inventory management. It just takes out the survival mechanic of the inventory. I'm actually not quite sure what you mean by that. The realism argument. I don't know. I guess I'll just repeat the point that I made before. I like balance. Balance is like one of my personal tenets, or you could say one of my personal morals or philosophies. So we have realism on the one hand, and then we have imagination on the other hand. We could call this order and chaos, or law and chaos. We could call this known and unknown. We could call this reality and dreams, nonfiction and fiction, realistic versus romantic. Yeah. For me, my personal style is a balance of both. So things are grounded in or rooted in the realism. There's gravity. What goes up must come down unless, it has certain conditions that we all know that mitigate that. You have to breathe. You have to eat and drink. If it gets too hot, you could get overheated. If it gets way too hot, you can get burned. You use your eyes to see. You use your brain to think. Your heart pumps blood. Your lungs breathe the air. You're born as a baby. You grow, over the months and the years, and you get older and you develop. You start off like this helpless and completely vulnerable, and you become a kid, then an adult, then elderly, and you get smarter and more developed and sophisticated as you go along, etc., etc., etc. You know, deserts are dry, water is wet. It's like the fundamental things that give meaning and structure that we as humans, if we lose grips on that too much, it doesn't make sense to us. We can't comprehend it. It's not interesting. We will laugh at it, or it will just be boring, or we'll just disregard it and we'll just forget it forever. If it's too unrealistic, then it's not good. It's poorly made, and we know that when we see it. When something is just way too unrealistic, it like kills our ability to believe it, and it kills our ability to invest ourselves into it. And so if you want your players to enjoy your game and to get into their characters and to like your setting and to care about your setting and to really get into your game, or if you want someone to get into your book or your comic or your YouTube videos that you're making, or the movie that you want to make, whatever it is that you want to create, and you want people to truly enjoy your content and care about it, or you want them to truly enjoy your content, then they have to be able to care about it. There's no way people will enjoy or invest themselves emotionally or spend their money on something if they just don't care about it. So if something is too nonsensical, people don't really care about it. We can't relate to it. It's like, if I see this character that's just all powerful, and it doesn't matter, he just sits there and, oh yeah, the orcs are invading. Okay, I've obliterated the orc army with the snap of my fingers. Oh, there's a dragon in the cave. All right, well, I can disintegrate the dragon as well. Oh, my son wants to marry this common girl, but oh, that's against the traditions of our land. Well, I'm just going to rewrite all of history. There we go. I've altered the facts of history. Now that law never existed, and nobility can marry commoners without any taboo or breaking a law or tradition at all. That sucks. There's no story there. It's so boring and pointless. So that's the realism part. Then we've got the imagination, the creativity, and that's where you dream. Yeah. And it could come from an actual dream at night while you're sleeping, or it could come from daydreaming and just letting your mind play with things. It's a very playful thing, even though it can get very dark. It's still very playful, and you daydream it out, and you say, okay, well, this kingdom, like most kingdoms, has these laws and these traditions that binds society together and keeps things from falling apart at the seams in a brutal and harsh existence that we all face. And they have this one law that's, nobility can only marry other nobles. They can't marry commoners. It's against the law. It's both like it's like a civil thing, and it's a religious thing, and it's tradition, and it's in your family, and there's a lot of pressure and importance to it. Okay. But what if the nobles in this realm are nobles because their ancestor centuries ago had elven blood, and that bit of elven blood, that's actually what distinguishes someone as a noble. You're of that bloodline. But now in this day, come to the current day in this setting, the elven blood is all but gone. The amount that remains in the bloodlines is nearly diminished to nothing. And here's this common girl, and her father was an elf. Look at her. Her ears are like half pointed. So here we have story now. We can do something with this, right? We're going to have people arguing. We're going to have characters arguing about it. One is like, she should be the noble, not you all. You all don't have any elven blood anymore. It left. It's all diminished out of your bloodline. You've just been, breeding with less and less percentage elven trait individuals. You become more and more human over time. You're 100% human now, or 99% human. And this girl's 50% elf. Shouldn't, by the law of the land, shouldn't she be not only a noble, but she should be the queen, right? She should be the highest rank. No, we can't just. She has no etiquette. She has no learning. She has no pedigree. She doesn't know how to behave herself. Look at her clothes. She wears, this frock where the hem is mud stained and it's stitched together by her, by her own mother. And then the other people will say, well, the prince is bound by duty to marry her. He must marry her. And in marrying her, she will be taken into the noble family, and she will rise from commoner to noble by merit of not only the marriage, but her elven heritage that she has by her elven father. And we'll train her in etiquette, and we'll have the seamstresses and master tailors weave her fine gowns of silk and jewels. So yeah, man, that's it. That's the balance, the realism and the imagination, or realism and fantasy. To me, when you have that balance, that's where things become the most ripe for storytelling. They're not too restricted, and they're not too just like chaotic. Anything is everything and nothing means anything. All right, I think that'll do it. I see we've got some pretty cool comments on here, but I've gone for like an hour and a half, and I think that'll be good for one Bard stream. Thanks, everyone. This was another great Bard stream. I really enjoyed these topics and interacting with you. I appreciate you all, and look out for some more announcements, updates, and videos to come in the near future. I'm excited for it. May your adventures be many. See you next time, everyone.